Welcome to Constant Curiosity, a trauma-informed podcast. I am your host, Kathy Hart, the Director of Training at Starr Commonwealth. I am here with a longtime colleague and friend, Katie Carpenter, and we're going to spend some time talking today about how to support staff with shifting to a trauma-informed mindset. So Katie, as we're getting ready to dive into this, why don't you give the audience a brief introduction into your professional career that's led you to us here today.
So I'm Katie. I am currently our director of our Student Resilience and Empowerment Center, which is a program we're running for middle schoolers out of the YMCA here locally. My professional journey started a while back. I have about 15 years working directly with youth, both abuse, neglect, and delinquents, and now working with kids who are actually in the public schools. I like to tell people all the time that I was raised professionally here.
Me too.
Here on Starr's campus. I've worked for Starr now for 13 years. Started out on our residential campus, which I think is just a crash course in everything.
Very true.
And so really that was my professional journey. And then about 4 years ago, transitioned to working into public schools.
I remember.
Which was actually really, really great for me to go from working with kids who had been removed from everything to actually working with kids who we had an opportunity to prevent that from happening to them. So that was a nice transition. And then about a year ago, transitioned into this new role working with this middle school program.
So I know you and I have actually trained this content together. We developed some of this content together. So it's going to be just us having a conversation for sure. So you know this well, but for our audience, is one of the biggest topics that come up when we're coaching and consulting in school systems, public, private, virtual, even college levels, and now it's even coming into other areas as well besides your school systems, is helping staff switch their mindsets, because we know that mindset is very important when we're talking about becoming trauma-informed. I mean, I actually just had a friend, she's a brand new teacher. It's her first year of teaching as my friend's daughter, and she said to me, I can't help colleagues with their mindset. Their mindset is stuck where they're at, and I was like, I am going to send you some information.
False.
Right. But, so this is a big topic, as you know, in schools. And so as we kind of delve into our first question is, why do you think that is? Why is change difficult? And when we're talking specifically about like our education professionals, what's so difficult about that for them, in your opinion?
I think that's like a multifaceted question because
no simple answer.
Yeah, there's
what?
no right.
What?
Like there's just no like check. I think that part of it is that if you go into a career where you're working with kids, you're so passionate about the work that you do. Mm-hmm. And if somebody comes in and tells you, hey, you know what? I actually don't think that's working. How about you try this? It's very difficult for professionals in this situation to not take that personally. Mm-hmm. And to not look at it like, I deeply care about this kid. Everything that I'm doing is coming from a place of wanting to help this kid. And so there's that initial resistance that they're perceiving that direction or that shift in what they're doing as people thinking that what they were doing was intentionally causing harm, and it's not, right? Yeah. And so I think sometimes it just is, understanding that change is hard. We're comfortable in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We know that our intentions in what we're doing is to be very helpful, and I think hearing from other people that we could do it differently or better sometimes causes us to feel a certain sort of way for all of the work that we've done previously. I think change is hard. I don't like to change. You know that. You used to supervise me. We've known each other for years. There used to be, a team of people who had to come tell me that something was going to be different because it was like, we gotta work her through this, let her know she's going to be safe, that we care about her.
But change is hard.
Yeah,
that's fair.
And I think with our professionals, it's the same thing. I know you care about kids. I know you're trying to do the right thing. I think that sometimes that works for certain kids, but we have this other group of kids where maybe we're missing the beat. So let's try this. And pushing them outside of their comfort zone, which is scary for everybody.
Right. Well, you make a good point that, helping professionals don't go into a helping profession because they're jerks, right? They care about what they're doing. They're passionate about it. And when they hear that maybe what they're doing isn't helpful as much as they want it to be, that can be a little bit soul crushing to some people.
It's jarring.
Yeah.
And, and none of us want to go to work and have a feeling that maybe what we did caused harm.
Yeah. Or impacting people's sense of mastery too, right?
Right.
Think about the circle of courage.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And people like to stay in their comfort zone, right? There's a reason that's a topic. That's a reason that's a phrase. Right. We're comfortable. Even if it's chaotic and scary, it's what we know.
It's what we know. It's what we're used to.
Right. And it's predictable in that sense. Like, we know that something bad is going to happen. Even though it's bad, we know it's happening, and so it's safer. And so, like, that is a huge piece of it, too, is that people necessarily don't want to try something different. It can create a lot of stress and anxiety. As you mentioned, you well know.
Right. Nobody likes to be uncomfortable.
That's a very good point, is that growth mindset, right? Sometimes we haven't got there yet. We need to stretch that a little bit.
Right.
So that's absolutely a piece of it. So, like, in response to that, why be open to change? Like, how have you helped people in that journey to expand their mindset or expand maybe their interventions? Like, what can you tell our audience about how to help people be open to change?
I think it boils down to approach a lot of times. Some of the things that I've done with educators in the past who I've been coaching or working with closely is, you have your seers to believers, and so sometimes I'll model for them how an interaction or a strategy works with a kid, and that gets them more comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. You have your go-getters who are just like, oh, you want me to try a new intervention? Cool. I'm going to do it 7 times. Just come watch it and let me know how I'm doing. And I think just figuring out what their comfort level is with change. If you have a resistor, right, then you're going to have to kind of create a plan around, first they're going to panic, then they're going to want to argue about why what they're doing is exactly what they should be doing. And then they're going to want to see it. You got to prove it, and then they're going to want to try it. And so I think how you approach implementing change depends on who you're talking to and who you're working with in the moment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, I talk about trauma-informed, also means that we take an individualized approach. There's some things, right, that can be done. This is an overall intervention, but we really want to take that individualized approach with our educators as well. And you made mention of, like, the term resistors. We actually have, like you and I have talked about that, the coach, we have this certification, a trauma-informed resilience focused coach, and where we go through all of this, right, where there's a resistor, that people that are just like, I'm not trying it, no way, and no how, and then we have a list of interventions. There's change leaders, which are, like you said, the go-getters. They want to go try it 7 times and get it done. Then you got your fence rider who might need some modeling first. Like you mentioned, that they might want to see how it works, and they're going to kind of sit back and make sure this stuff is working. And then you have the old historians, right? These might be people of tenure that have always done it this way. I'm going to keep doing it this way. It's always worked. But has it? It's a whole nother conversation, right? And so there's tons of content in our coach certification around all of that. And so we definitely definitely taking that individual approach. But when we figure out the best approach, what motivation can we use for those staff? Like what's on the other side for them? Like when I change, if I go through all this, Katie, I try all these new scary things, what's the benefit?
Tap into their passion. Right. So, like, if we're all truly in this to serve young people and help young people be more successful, then what's on the other side of this change is not just about benefiting them as a professional, but it's helping them grow as a professional to benefit the kids that we're trying to serve. And that's the reward. When you have a kid who has been just struggling behaviorally in a classroom for a really long time, having a lot of conflict with educators, having a lot of conflict with students, and you get an educator to actually go through this process and do the hard work to implement some things differently, to change their approach. And you see that student go from being that, quote unquote problem child that they often get labeled, to being a kid who has a relationship in that classroom, who's walking in and doing exactly what they need to be doing. We had a student at the rec today show up with missing assignments. And this was a student that we have been working with for probably 2 months. Lots of behaviors, lots of just resistance to any sort of schoolwork. And it's, just staying in the game with her. Was the key. And no matter what she was not giving up, adjusting what we were doing, changing what we were doing in terms of our approach with her. And today she showed up and said, hey, I brought some work for when we have some downtime here that I can get completed. Wow. And that to us that's the benefit of the change, right? we've all been doing this for years and years and years, and we still have to change our approach depending on what student we have in front of us.
Awesome. So like, yeah, why did you get into education in the first place?
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. You know, that reminds me of one of my favorite things to talk about when we do our 10 steps to a trauma-informed school is, if you remember that slide that talks about what research says when schools are trauma-informed. Staff, the school climate goes up. Staff feeling of self-efficacy that they can manage behaviors in their classroom. Academic test scores go up. And so like I'm thinking of all these things that we know research tells us and our own data outcomes here at Starr, right? Some of them from schools that you worked in, right? That tell us that staff and students just feel better and there's less behaviors when people are trauma informed. And so like, you know, you said, well, I think it was actually one of your colleagues talked about that earlier is, in part one is that we become salespeople too, right? Talking about why we want to help people make this change. But I love the idea of tapping into their passion, right? Because nobody goes into education to be jerks or be mean to kids, right? Right, so when you reflect on just change in general and individuals' ability to change, so do you see any similarities between staff and students? Because you've worked in both roles. Like right now, you are a supervisor of staff, right? And you're very fortunate to have a great group of trauma-informed, very skilled staff.
And we've been together for years, for the most part.
Yeah, and you've known all of them for years. So you aren't doing much work with trauma-informed with your staff because they already are there. You've gotten them there. But when you think about like helping change staff mindset, like what an educational professional, and then helping students, which you're doing a lot of that work now, right? Working directly with students. What do you think about their abilities to change? Like how similar is it or different between staff and students? When you compare those two?
I would definitely say that kids are easier. Kids just naturally are more malleable than adults. You know, we at times tend to be very fixed in our ways. I've had this much education, I've got this much experience, I've been doing X, Y, and Z, you know, like, and so we become very fixed in what we're doing. And so it becomes very difficult for us to hear, all of that's great, now we want to do this. You know, whereas our young people, you know, I think Tony hit on this, they don't want to feel bad. Right? They don't show up every day hoping that they hurt as many people as possible. Nobody goes home feeling.
They don't wake up saying, I'm gonna be a jerk today, right?
Nobody goes home feeling good about those kinds of things. And so I think that they have more of a desire to do something different. Once they know better, they do better. And so with our young people, a lot of times it's easier to get buy-in from them because it feels better to do something different. Whereas our adults tend to have more discomfort to do things different because we get very comfortable in what we're doing and the pathway that we're on.
So when you think about changing staff mindset, so think of all the times that you're working with, you know, educational professionals and all the times you've done that. How do you know when, like, what does success look like to you? Like, I know you've got some stories because we've talked about them, about some like aha moments where you finally walk by the classroom and
there's a comfort corner.
Yes,
you know. Yeah, I think for me, success is, did you move the needle at all? We talk about when you're being trauma informed with kids, you meet them where they're at. You have to do the same thing with adults. It applies to both sides. And so we talked about the differences, the change leaders, the resistors, the historians. They're all at a different place in the process. And so it's really easy to get a change leader's buy-in, you know, and you can go in and you can have a conversation and boom, they're doing it the next class period. You know, they're more engaged, they're more willing to try things. When I was working in a middle school, I was working with all different kinds of teachers, and they were on all different parts of the process. And so I had one teacher who, you know what, like she was in it. She redesigned her entire classroom and really turned her classroom into a trauma-informed intervention.
So a change, like when you're change leaders, yeah.
Yep. And then there was a teacher down the hall who I had to spend a whole year, you know, just providing research, having conversations, answering questions. And I walked by her class towards the end of the school year, and there in the corner was a comfort corner. That was a win for me. Yeah. It didn't matter to me that it was just a comfort corner, you know, whereas the other teacher in the hallway had redesigned her own classroom. They were both at different places in the process. Right. And so to me, success is just measured, did we move the needle at all?
Nice.
In the direction that we want to go? That's success.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Like as you're talking, I'm thinking too about like how do I do that as I'm consulting and coaching with schools? I know, and one of the things that for me is like a big yes moment, like yes, is when the conversation shifts to what consequence do we give a child to what unmet need is happening.
Right.
How can we meet belonging, mastery, independence, generosity? Like that is a big shift because so many schools right now are struggling with behaviors post COVID. And so for them, a lot of the conversation is like, how do we get control of our classrooms? And structure is important, right? We have to have spaces that kids can learn in. But when we spend all the time talking about what the consequence should be or how many days they should be suspended or how many detentions they get, we're not really talking about the important stuff, which is what is that? Yeah, what is that behavior trying to tell us? What is the clue? What needs met? So I mean, that was what I was reflecting on as you were talking as well. So for anybody in our audience who is just starting their careers, like I think I mentioned, my friend's daughter is just starting her career, and so her and I spent like an hour one night talking about trauma, going down the trauma-informed rabbit hole for sure. What can what encouragement or like I know because we would talk about this. You actually did work with some brand new. You had some brand new baby teachers, and you had some teachers who've been there for 20-some years. And so, what encouragement about helping shift mindset can you give some of these newer teachers?
Stay the course.
Nice, yeah.
Really understand that the work you're doing is valuable, and that if it's hard, then you're probably doing the right work. And find things that you can do for yourself throughout your day that are about boosting your self-care, how you're feeling about you. Because if you're feeling good about you, you're going to be able to present that and push that out to the young people that you're serving. But I think we often talk about how hard the work is, and the work is hard, and so, I have some strategies I've given some teachers is write 5 things down each class period, 5 things that went well. And then before you walk out the door to go to your car at the end of the day, read what you wrote, and when you're walking out of the building, those are the things you're taking with you.
Nice.
Could have had 37 negative things happen, but when you leave the building, you're going to leave remembering that I had 20 really good things happen throughout my day. I also would challenge new teachers to find somebody in the building that can be a strong support and a mentor who can pick them up at the end of the day if they have a tough day, who can high five them at the end of the day if they had a really good day. Create that support system within your environment. You talked about my team a little bit. We wouldn't be able to do this work. We wouldn't be able to do this work if we weren't there to support each other throughout the day, if we weren't checking on each other, if we weren't tagging each other out sometimes, if at the end of the day we didn't take a moment, take a deep breath, and really get ourselves back to where we need to be and talk about the good things that happen that day. Because there's good things that happen in every class period, no matter how difficult that class period was. Something positive happened in there, and so figuring out how do you focus on those things before you walk out the door. If you focus on those things, you're going to come back in the door the next day feeling good about the work you do.
And so many educators, especially when there wasn't a lot of intermixing because of COVID, like we had to keep kids in the classroom and they couldn't eat lunch together. It's getting back to the way it was pre-COVID now, but so many teachers talk about like feeling like they're on an island because they're in a classroom alone. And so especially for new teachers and I would recommend, I'm sure you do too, all teachers have that source of positive support in their building, but specifically it's important for new people, right? As you think about the mentors we've had in our careers.
Right. Well, and I think exactly when I first started here on this campus and I was, 20-something, like fresh out of college, thought I could save the world,
And you looked like you were 12.
And I looked like I was 12,
right. You got mistaken for students sometimes.
And, I couldn't have possibly overcome all of the things that I needed to learn and improve on and deal with some of the stress and pressures that just came with the work and changes and everything without this support system, who was you got this, and I remember my boss at the time, sometimes would just come up and put her hand on my shoulder and say, Yeah, would come and say, great work today, kid. And I lived for those moments.
Nice.
Like that was, and that's something that I try to pass on to the people that I'm coaching or the people that I'm working with is, you know what, you did great work today.
Yeah, and your point about I love that, write down 5 good things that happen, just real short notes, and then you take a lot of time. Because we all have a negativity bias. It's evolutionarily programmed into us, right? That we want to see the problems and fix them. And recently I found, through some of the other trainings we do, I discovered that a name for that our brain never stops working on those problems. Like you think about if you're trying to remember somebody's name and you can't remember their name, but then you change topic and it pops in your head. That's the Zargonic effect. Our brain even works unconsciously to try to solve that problem. And so when we stop and make that list of those 5 things and we leave on that note, like you mentioned, that's going to help counteract that negativity bias that is programmed into us humans. And it's basically a survival skill because we're all living in these stressful times. We need to really have strategies that we put in place to focus on positive. So I love that takeaway for multiple reasons. To just focus on those. The problems will be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we have to have our head on right? Yeah. There's a reason we say that, right? We got to have our mindset straight to be able to go back in the fire.
We have to lift ourselves up at the end of the day, and we have to lift up the people around us.
Yep, because any helping professional, whether it's teaching, counseling, it takes a toll on us because we're giving of ourselves.
Right.
And so we really need to be able to support each other in that for sure. All right, for those who have been established in their career or maybe nearing retirement, so our tenured teachers and educators, what advice about helping support this staff mindset shift can you give them?
I'm laughing because the first thing that comes to my mind is leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
Well,
why don't you explain to the audience why we say that, like where that comes from?
Because for me, I remember residential, we're always short-staffed. We were always short-staffed. We were always... and there was
a lot of schools are in that position.
And
right
a lot
now.
of schools are in that position. Yeah. And we very quickly slip into, if I could deal with it, you can deal with it. And it took me a really long time to understand that part of my role in this profession is to create a pathway for people so that their experience is better than mine.
Nice, yeah.
So if I've learned all of these things that can make this easier for somebody, my job is to pass that on. My job is to share that and create a better experience for them. And then their job is to pass it on to the next person. And I think sometimes we lose track of that. And we, like I said, we get stuck in that.
We get a sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
I'm not just pointing fingers. I mean, I've been doing this. I've been at Starr for 25 years, right? So we get this sense of entitlement. Well, I've paid my dues.
Right. I had to deal with it.
I've spent my time. Now you can do it. But we need to take a stance of, like you said, like we've always taught that as a value here at Starr to students, to staff, leave it better than you found it, right? Whether it's a physical space, like pick up the trash that's on the floor or organize something, or it's, like you're talking about, more about interventions and treatment modalities. That is a value of Starr.
It should be a value for everyone, ideally, with that idea that you did all of this learning. You didn't do all of this learning to retire and take it with you and not share it.
Like what's your professional legacy?
Right. What is your legacy? And I think that our legacy in the helping profession is to create ways, because if we create ways for professionals to find more success, again, trickle down effect. Yeah. Kids find success faster. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for.
Right. No, that's a great mantra. So, be the mentor for the young teacher, that new teacher, right?
Right. Volunteer. Yeah. Don't even wait for them to seek you out. Yeah. You know what? First day of school, we got, Mrs. Smith, who's brand new. We need the teacher that's been there the longest to, on their own, just say, you know what? I'm with her this year. Yeah. I'm going to take care of her, and I'm going to help pave this way for her.
And I often, that you bring to mind, I'm often hearing in schools is, they will have these volunteer committees like the PBIS committee or the trauma-informed committee or the restorative practices committee, like whatever the committee is. And I often hear that it's the same, like newer, younger teachers. And I get it, right? Because sometimes maybe some of that entitlement, like I've spent my time on those committees, I don't need to do it anymore. But those committees need those voices of wisdom and reason and all those years of experience, like to help support that staff mindset shift to be trauma informed. There's an F in it, Kath. To help that, I knew. Hey, the fact that hasn't happened earlier is a good thing.
The other piece of that though too is that's a good point, because if you have fresh faces on these committees every single year, then you run into you're just trying the same things every year,
Right.
you know, and so you do need those people that have been there for a while who can say, you know what, these were kind of the pitfalls that we ran into. Doesn't mean you don't try it.
Right.
Just means I just want you to be aware that if we're going to try this again, these are the things that we need to do differently.
That's a really good point, because we're not saying that those people should present, well, this is the way we've always done it, so we need to do it this way and we shouldn't try it. But we need to be aware of what the potential barriers are and how we might be able to overcome them this year or with this resource or those kinds of things. Yeah. You've spent some time at Starr Commonwealth. Like you said, we both comment about how we kind of grow up professionally.
They raised us. We're doing great.
We did, yeah.
We're doing great.
Us. And they've kept us around as, like, as a poster child for problems or opportunities. But if you reflect back on your time, and all the different roles that you've had, and like you summed them up in a couple, but you've had a lot of different positions here at Starr. You're coming up next to me, which we often say I have 9 lives, all the different things I've done. But as you're looking forward into your role, right now, it's a great blend of what your past experiences, meshing together with the public school systems and all your years here on our residential campus. What are you excited about? Like, what's keeping you curious?
I am really just excited about going to work every day, to be honest. I have a great team. And it was really, really wonderful to be able to kind of reunite with people on a team who I had worked with in the past and, kind of rebuild that. I'm excited about the work we do every day. I'm excited about, we ran a pilot in the spring and we kind of talk about this year's program. And again, to us, we talk every day about what we learned today, because it's an ever-growing, ever-changing program because it's brand new. And so all of that learning and all of that growth is just really exciting. And what are we going to do next year? Where are we going to take it next year with everything that we learned this year? We're looking at, are we going to run summer programming? That's exciting to me. The idea of potentially having an opportunity to run some programming maybe here, which is home to me.
Right.
So I'm just excited about that. I'm excited about all of those things because of all of the impact that they have on kids that we work with. And I know Tony talked a little bit about it, but we really turned a corner all of a sudden with 6 or 7 of our kids recently. And that's exciting. Kids who were fighting us really every step of the way.
You see an incremental change.
You see the incremental change, and then all of a sudden light bulbs go off in our heads. Wait a minute, she's different. All of that excites me.
Mm-hmm. It's important to notice those small changes. It's easy when they're so small, it's easy to overlook the day-to-day for sure.
And it's hard when you see them every day. And so you do miss those incremental changes until all of a sudden you just take a moment and you put all the pieces together and then you see this massive growth.
Well, that's another great thing I think about, the tip you gave of 5 things to write down that went well, looking back on that over time, that will also be a measure of progress. What went well in November is going to be
yeah, because in November you're writing down, only 4 pencils got thrown at me today, or only 7 kids But in April, you're looking at, hey, you know what? 90% of my kids did their assignment today.
Right.
It's very different.
Because it's easy to get, we talked about the negativity bias, it's easy to get stuck in what's going wrong for sure. So I know some things that, when I'm thinking about this for schools and in regards to supporting the staff mindset shift, because this is something a lot of building leadership, as you know, struggle with helping the staff move, especially some of the historians and the resistors. They're some of the hardest people to move. And you actually said some things that reminded me of some good interventions, with the resistors and the historians, is using that data, using the research. Sometimes, especially, you and I have more of a human services or counseling background, and we'll get some feedback about, oh, you just want us to be all fluffy and counseling and social worky to everybody.
Baby kids.
Yeah. But But sometimes we know that sometimes the hard science, the data is what really sells the point. And so like, I'm curious about and excited about if more people would dive into like some of those interventions and really embracing some of the resources we have around the science and what works when like the outcomes when schools are trauma informed. I mean, there's a reason that is a step in our 10 steps, is because knowing the outcome data, like knowing what you've accomplished. And you think about like when you read the data reports of the schools that you worked in, like you were pretty much the only one working in them. There was a few other people helping you here and there, right? That came in and did things once in a while. But that has to feel like a sense of accomplishment when you read some of the progress that teachers have made.
Yes. Well, and you know me, Kathy, I'm more quantitative than qualitative. So I actually really love in those reports reading about how the services and the work made teachers feel more empowered and successful and in control of like their environment. But I also agree with you, like when you're working with resistors and historians, they need the graphs.
Yep.
You know, they need that qualitative like proof that if you try this, you will find success.
Yes, because it can be, like you said earlier, it's a motivation to help people change. So when I think about, this is a topic that all schools struggle with, is how do I get my staff on board, right? Because it's not something you could mandate, right? You can't go in and tell a teacher, you're going to be trauma informed today. And like, you know, what one of our colleagues have mentioned is how much work teachers have to do, and sometimes they feel like they don't have enough time or resources. And so giving them, sometimes if they have the attitude of this is just one more thing. But another thing I'm curious and excited about is when we can get people to understand and adapt the mindset of, it's not another thing, trauma informed is not another thing you do, it's about how you do what you do.
Yeah, it's the thing.
You're going to reflect on the end of the day one way or the other, so you make an intentional connection to reflect on the 5 grateful things, right? And so what did you say? What was your comment? It was really...
I said it's the thing.
The thing to do.
Yeah, it's just the thing.
Yeah.
You can set all the other stuff aside because it's all going to be in this process. So you're actually not setting it aside. But sometimes you have to tell them, we're going to do this. And then eventually all of that ends up being in here. It just is the thing.
I had someone tell me yesterday, this person is coming to us to become a trainer. And she was a lawyer. Then she started working in schools as I forget what her next title was, but now she does like all the social and emotional learning programming. And she was an advocate for kids as a lawyer. And she said, this is just amazing because she was there like a school safety officer. So when you talk about safety, when you're talking about social and emotional learning, when you're talking about advocating for the needs of kids, she said, these 10 steps that you have wraps it all up. It's the umbrella. And I was like, yes, you get it. Like, it's the umbrella. Like, we approach everything with this trauma-informed mindset, and all the other things are under that umbrella and fall into place. So I was like, she got it. She got the mindset. Well, as we wrap up for the day, is there any other parting tips or final things you want our audience to know about supporting this staff mindset? I keep moving my hands. Like, we're moving the mindset.
We're moving them.
Get an oblique workout.
You know, I'm just going to repeat something that I said earlier. Just stay the course.
Yep.
Take the steps to do it, and do it at your own comfort level, right? So maybe if you aren't sure, start small.
Yeah, like you said, you don't have to be a whole classroom, create a comfort corner.
Right. And get really good at implementing a comfort corner. And then, you know what? Implement some alternative seating. And then get really good at a comfort corner and alternative seating. And also understand that if it's not working, adjust it. Make a move. Like everybody's trauma-informed classroom is not going to look the same.
Right.
And I think that that's also really important.
Good point.
I think that's also really important for people to know, is that your process about building relationships with kids and how you set up trauma-informed strategies in your classroom may look different than the teacher next door. And that is okay.
Yeah. We want you to have some, make it be you. Right?
Yeah.
Like our spaces would look totally different, right?
Yes, they would.
Mine would be probably a little crazy. Too much fun, not enough work.
Mine would be color-coded and have arrows on the floor. And, and so I think that's really important for people when they start to look into going into this. And so that's one thing that I would leave with people is you implement this as part of you and how you go about doing things in your classroom. And just understanding that it's all going to be different, and that if things aren't working, make a change.
But give it some time.
Give it some time. Give it some time, and then figure out later on how to re-implement it differently.
I know we said we were wrapping up, but you made me think of one more question that I want you to answer, and
Okay.
then I promise we'll wrap it up. Like when you said, like when you were a baby staff member and your boss said, "Good job out there today, kid," or whatever. What about building leadership? Because a lot of times this is the dialogue we're having is with leadership or supervisors. What takeaway can you give to them if they're not a classroom teacher, but they're like in charge of implementing this trauma-informed mindset?
Meet your teachers where they're at. And much like we've been talking about, praise the teacher that just puts a comfort corner in just as much as you praise the teacher.
over perfection.
Right. Praise just as much as you praise the teacher that creates an entire like trauma-informed classroom, because they both are working hard and they both are working at a pace that they're both comfortable with. And so I think administrators need to also recognize that your teachers are at different phases, just like your students are at different phases. And we all don't do things at the same rate or pace.
Nice.
So that would be what I would leave with them.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure that people have gleaned a lot of wisdom from you growing up professionally here at Starr.
Thanks for talking to me.